All right, Alexander, let's talk about the situation with regards to oil and OPEC Plus and a 2 million barrel a day production cut. And this is after Biden went to Saudi Arabia, and he was talking about Saudi Arabia actually increasing capacity by a million, increasing production by a million barrels a day. The Saudis said, we were talking about increasing capacity in 2027 by about a million barrels a day. Nothing to do with production, but Biden thought that he had everything squared away. He didn't. He doesn't. The U.S. is flipping out. They are saying that this is some sort of collusion between MBS and Putin, and Saudi Arabia is siding with Russia, and Saudi Arabia is going to pay a very heavy price for this betrayal. Meanwhile, Biden is looking at Venezuela to try and help out. And Biden is now going to retap. He had a little bit of a pause, like about a week's pause, but now he's going to retap into America's strategic petroleum reserves, which are already at a 40-year low. We're talking red alert low. Not looking good for Biden. Saudi Arabia has definitely sent the collective West a message, though I think Saudi Arabia was just acting out in its best interest, given also everything that the collective West has tried to do to OPEC and to oil and to gas and to energy. They've been trying to control energy and the price of oil and the price of gas. And Saudi Arabia is just saying, no, we're not going to put up with this. We're going to do what's in our best interest, and we're not going to let you guys walk all over us. And you can see it in that exchange between the Reuters reporter and the Saudi energy minister. I think that exchange had a lot of meaning, a lot of hidden meaning there. We're a sovereign country. We're not going to let you guys roll all over us or control us. Anyway, incredible developments that have taken place. And actually, I think I was reading an article, Alexander. I forgot what it was about. I forgot what it exactly was saying, but it was from Bloomberg, and it was something along the lines of, I know what it is. Saudi Arabia has said, Aramco has said that they're going to actually sell oil to the West at 20 cents more, while they're going to leave the price of oil exported to Asia at its current price levels, kind of like a cherry on top of the I'm going to use a bad word of the what cake. Anyway, what do you make of everything that's happening? Incredible.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. Now, let's talk about this Russian collusion between Saudi Arabia. The Democrats are obsessed with this topic of Russian collusion. Everybody colludes with the Russians, who does what the Democrats in the United States don't like. So Trump was in collusion with the Russians, except he wasn't. The Saudis are in collusion with the Russians. Well, are they in collusion with the Russians? Well, they did agree a production cut with the Russians. But then everybody, all the other members of OPEC, and by the way, just for those who don't know, Venezuela is a member of OPEC too. All of these countries have agreed a production cut. Why have they agreed a production cut? What is OPEC? OPEC is an oil producers cartel. I mean, that's what it is. And what is the purpose of a cartel? It is to control the price of oil. Oil producers cartel wants to control the price of oil. What have Western governments been trying to do throughout the summer? They've been trying to control the price of oil. They've been trying to push oil prices down. And they've done it with all kinds of ways. They've tried to, the Saudis believe, engineer recessions in their own countries, which will bring down the price of oil. That's one thing. But I think the other thing, and the Saudis, we've been saying this on so many programs, this idea of a price cap on Russian oil enforced through the oil industry for an oil producers cartel like OPEC is anathema. It means that the price of oil will no longer be decided in discussions between Riyadh and Abu Dhabi and Caracas and Tehran and indeed even Moscow, the oil producers. It's going to be decided by a consumers cartel, by the G7 countries, which will be able to control the price of oil through using the insurance industry. Now, there is no conceivable way that the Saudis would allow a thing like that to happen. So they've retaliated. They've said in this kind of situation, oil prices are already lagging energy prices, general edge energy prices. They've been lagging the rise in food prices. We're not going to go along with these crazy plans that you have. If you're going to go down this route, we're going to cut production.
Why is the Biden White House then just not engaging with OPEC?
You're absolutely correct, because see, the trouble is they can't engage. They can't just engage with OPEC if they're going to stabilize oil prices, which is something, by the way, which OPEC has been telling them right from the first day of this whole crisis. If they're going to engage with OPEC, they have to engage with Russia. They have to restore smooth functioning to the oil market, the global oil market. What is happening is, because of this sanctions war that the West has launched against Russia, they are destabilizing. They're actually balkanizing the global oil market. They're just dividing it up into segments. So exactly as Aramco said, the price of oil in Asia is now going to be less than the price of oil in the West, because Asia is importing oil from wherever it's produced, from Russia, from the Gulf, from Africa, from wherever, whereas oil in the West is going to be more expensive because the West is refusing to import oil from the country which is the second biggest producer. So it's illogical. The West is behaving. It's idiotic.
Go ahead. You were saying it's so idiotic.
What makes it particularly idiotic, and what I was going to say was this: before the sanctions were imposed, I can remember it. I remember tracking all the discussions that were taking place about the sanctions. The oil industry, I'm talking about the Western oil companies, Exxon, Mobil, or Texaco, all of them, they were all consulted. And they were told, don't do this thing. It'd be a huge mistake. Oil markets at the moment are very tight. You mustn't impose sanctions against Russian oil, because if you do, you will create major oil shortages and imbalances and structural problems in the world oil market. And of course, you will annoy the Saudis and enrage OPEC. They went ahead and did it anyway, because they imagined that, the Russian economy was this house of cards that, if they blew strongly enough, it will just all come tumbling down. And it hasn't. And because you were talking about the Biden administration, they have this enormous sense of entitlement. The Democrats in the US have an enormous sense of entitlement. They assume that Saudi Arabia's job is to increase production to get them out of their problems, even as the Democrats, Janet Yellen, come up with harebrained schemes to lower the oil price through using the European insurance industry. And of course, again, complete disregard of Saudi interests, Saudi concerns. And of course, the Saudis, as you absolutely rightly say, well, we don't have any, you may have your sense of entitlement, but we have our national interests. From our point of view, from Saudi Arabia's point of view, maintaining stability, as they would call it, which in this moment in time means a high oil price, is essential for us, and that's what we're going to do.
I find this whole affair so ironic, but so justifying in a way. It's almost poetic justice in a way, because here you have Saudi Arabia, who everyone thought was the puppet poodle of the United States. Its only goal, everyone would always think, the only goal of Saudi Arabia is to prop up the USD. That's the only reason for their existence, is to be a client state of the US. And they're the ones that are now acting out in their best interest. They're acting as a 100% sovereign nation. And they're siding with Russia, the eternal enemy of the collective West at this point in time. You can't get a bigger enemy than Russia for the collective West. Well, at the same time, you have Saudi Arabia showing what sovereignty means and how you go about looking after your country's best interests. MBS is doing this while you have a bunch of poodle lapdog, just empty suits in the European Union going along with the destruction of their own country at the behest of another empty suit sitting at the White House who doesn't know what day of the week it is. And that the whole thing is just, it's beyond crazy. It is beyond nuts, and everyone is going along with this in the collective West. Everyone is going along with this. This is not even the blind leading the blind. This is far worse than that. And Saudi Arabia is actually showing how sovereignty is done to all of us Europeans, supposedly us free, sovereign European nations.
Yes.
This is upside down world. If you told me this was going to happen 10 years ago, I would have been like, no. What are you talking about?
Yes. I mean, what it does show is the extent to which the world has changed. Because I agree, 10 years ago, the Saudis would not have dared act against the US in this kind of fashion. But they've looked at the US now. They've seen what goes on in the US. They've seen the Biden administration. They've met Biden. And as you correctly say, they say, we got other options. We got China, which is a powerful country and it's our friend. We got Russia, which is a powerful country, which is our friend. We've stabilized the Middle East to a great extent. So now, at the end of the day, we are going to pursue our own interests. And we have a new leader in MBS who is not, the decrepit figure, the previous Saudi monarchs were, who just couldn't even conceive of any kind of situation where they didn't do America's bidding. So, the world has changed. You have leaders in Saudi Arabia. It sounds extraordinary to say this. I agree. And, I'm almost swallowing my tongue as I say that. But you do. And, of course, you have poodles in Europe. And, the Europe, which once upon a time was led by leaders like, Napoleon, Louis XIV, de Gaulle in France, Winston Churchill, William Pitt in Britain. Well, we won't touch too much on who has led Germany in the past. But anyway, a Europe which had, outstanding, extraordinary statesmanship, powerful leaders once upon a time. And, if Biden, of all people, tells them, impose more sanctions on yourself in order to annoy Putin, well, they'll say yes, and, tell us more that we can do, because, if it means we're going to close down even more of our factories, well, that's fine with us.
Okay, final question. How does this play out? Who's going to feel the pain first? Obviously, Europe is going to feel it, I imagine, first. When is the U.S. going to start feeling the pain? Is there a way out?
This is a good question. Well, this is a good question. I mean, Europe is going to feel the pain. It's going to feel the pain almost immediately. And one can sense this. We're already in Britain, by the way. There's now talk about 3-hour blackouts on particular days. This is now apparently being planned and rehearsed how that would work. So you can see where we're going in Europe. But it is going to have an effect on the US because if oil prices are high in the West, they're going to be higher in the United States. That's not going to work well for the Democrats, presumably in the midterms, if oil prices are now going to start rising again. It's all very well for Biden to deplete the strategic oil reserve as he's been doing, but there comes a point where that becomes extremely dangerous. And there's a finite amount in those reserves anyway. So I think it could have a political effect over the next couple of weeks. And there could be a bigger knock-on effect in the US later. Because, of course, the US is very, very sensitive to oil price movements, politically and economically. Now, I will say this. There's been talk about the US restricting oil exports to try and keep the price of oil in the US low. There's even some murmurings denied by US officials to Reuters that LNG exports might be restricted as well. LNG prices are rising in the US too. If that happens, I mean, Europe is stuffed, frankly. I mean, if they can't import oil and LNG from the US, well, what have they got left? But I will repeat again what we've said many times on many programs. The Democrats are focused on power in the United States. If it's important to them to try to keep the economy in the US running in a way that prevents a complete wipeout in the midterms, or a further political crisis beyond the midterms, and if that requires restricting oil and LNG exports, they will do it, regardless of what Europe says or thinks. And of course, if that happens, the Democrats are now absolutely confident that even if somebody like Robert Habeck complains, as he's just done, by the way, about astronomical costs, prices for US LNG, it's not going to change anything, because the poodles of Brussels will continue to dance to the American tune, however bad in Europe it gets.
A tune played by Joe Biden.
I know,
it's
yeah,
incredible.
Quite, yeah, exactly.
I
mean,
right?
if it was JFK, for example, you might say there's some purpose there, but when it's Joe, who shakes hands with invisible people and can't remember whether a congressman is alive or dead, it does make you wonder about the, shall we say, the intellect. I'm using some very, very careful words of some of the people that inhabit the corridors of power in the European capitals.
All right, well, you don't F with the Biden, as he said the other day anyway. The Duran.locals.com and Duran shop, 10% off. Use the code Good Day, and look for us on Rockfin as well. I'll put a link down below for the Rockfin channel link. We are on Rockfin as well. Take care.